It's my nerd world, and welcome to it, a Star Wars show. This week, Obi Wan Kenobi Chapter 5. Better, but I still got some issues. Production is still problematic for me. More Taika Waititi news about the movie that he is working on, and when will we potentially see it on the big screen. Plus, we have your listener feedback. As always, you can email me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, and check out my EMBARK science fiction space opera series at mynerdworld.net. Now, let's get to this week's show.
It's an instinct. A feeling. The Force brought us together. We're not alone. Good people will fight if we lead them.
People keep telling me they know me. No one does.
But I do.
Long have I waited. And now you're coming together. Is your undoing. Confronting fear is the destiny of a Jedi. Your destiny.
The Force will be with you.
Always.
It is my nerd world, a Star Wars show, and welcome to it. I am your host, Jon Justice, and I'm glad you are once again with this week's episode. Thank you. My internet's down. So you might be wondering, well, how are you recording this if your internet's down? Well, I'm hotspotting. So typically I work off of a PC that's kind of my workhorse computer. And because it's a PC, I can't hotspot it with my iPhone. But I can do, what I can do is I can hotspot my Mac. So hopefully it gets fixed here in the next couple of days. They're doing construction on my street, and I'm fairly certain the guys tearing up the roads went and tore up my internet. So I flagged down a CenturyLink guy on my drive-in this week, today, and hopefully he's going to come and fix it a little bit later on. But that has nothing to do with Star Wars. We have a lot to talk about, though. I want to give you my thoughts on Obi Wan Kenobi Chapter 5 of the Disney Plus streaming show. Enjoyed this episode better, but man, I still got questions, and I still got some issues. And it might be partly because I'm in a very emotional state right now. This will be the last podcast for a couple of weeks. My third open heart surgery to fix this leak in my graft is coming up on Tuesday. Nerves are starting to build, be that as it may. I'm going to be in the hospital for, 4 to 6 days after the surgery is done on Tuesday, and I'll be home after that. So hopefully within the next couple of weeks, I'll be back with the podcast, and I'll give my thoughts on the season finale, which I'll be watching from a hospital bed on next Wednesday. But I wanted to make sure I got one more episode out. Talking about this week's chapter 5, plus this some quotes from Taika Waititi about the Star Wars movie that he's working on, and some of your listener feedback this week. So listen, I enjoyed. Let's just get right to it. I don't have all the bells and whistles I normally have because I'm working on a different platform and all that stuff's on my other computer. So I enjoyed this episode of Obi Wan Kenobi more so than I did the last episode. And I fully admit up front that right now, just because of this upcoming surgery, my emotions are really, really, just right on edge, every day. And perhaps I'm just being way more sensitive to the programming than normal. I don't think that I am, but I just want to put that caveat out there because maybe when I get past the surgery, I'll feel a little bit different. There was a lot I liked about this episode, and I have very little issue with the story that's being told. I very much believe that Obi Wan Kenobi, the story that they're telling right now would have been better served with a larger production motion picture. I just feel as if, for me personally, the production quality of these shows just is not up to par. Going back and watching episodes of The Mandalorian in between watching these episodes of Obi Wan Kenobi or the Book of Boba Fett, I don't understand why the production quality is as lacking as it is. More specifically, why they're allowing it to look this way. So let me talk a little bit more about that later on. Let's run through some of the episode, and I'll share with you some of my thoughts. I liked the opening flashback with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Hayden Christensen. I like the interspersing. It was different seeing the interspersing of the flashbacks of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker training. And this is pre-Return Revenge of the Sith. Weird, because it looked like there was some aging done, some de-aging done on Hayden Christensen in some shots, and there was not de-aging done in some other shots. Some shots he looked much younger, much closer to what we saw in Attack of the Clones, because this would have been a 19 or 20-year-old Hayden Christensen at the time, a 19 or 20-year-old Anakin Skywalker. But most of the shots of those flashbacks look like a current 40-some-year-old Hayden Christensen. And so I'm confused, again, more than anything, of why certain production decisions were being made. It didn't take me out of the show like some other aspects that I will share. I appreciated the way that the flashbacks mixed in with the storytelling of what was taking place on Jabim and what Obi-Wan Kenobi was going through internally, thinking about Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker. Okay, I liked that. I appreciated and liked the flashback scenes that we got with Reva and her involvement with Order 66. As we suspected, the character at the beginning of Episode 1 was the Padawan. That was Reva. And I felt that was kind of obvious from the get-go that was going to be the case. Maybe it wasn't obvious for other people, but it was kind of obvious for me. I do feel that under a better cinematographer or a better director, the way that this is playing out could have been handled better. It just seems very, very clunky. I was pleased that we got some establishing ship arrival shots to Jabim. We got to see the planet as the transport was arriving there. I still felt that some of the CGI work of the ship landing, it lacks the typical dynamics of what we're used to seeing in Star Wars productions, in terms of angling the shots in a different way. And it's weird because we got a shot of Vader later in the episode, that epic shot of Vader stopping the transport from leaving, using the Force. And there's one shot that's supposed to be this really epic frame of Vader standing there in his pose, holding the ship, in the air via the Force before it leaves the natural hangar that they had there, right? But the depth perception was all off. Like, the ship looked like the way the camera was angled, it made either Vader look really big or the ship look really small. And I don't understand some of the rationale with this. When the transport landed, it was just this very straightforward looking straight down shot of the ship coming in. And you compare that to Slave One landing on Geonosis in Attack of the Clones, where you get an angled shot of the landscape and the door opening up and the ship turning and coming in. I mean, it looks better. It reminds me of the shot of the transport from Episode 4 when it arrives on the hangar at Inquisitorius, where it just has this head-on shot and it lands. It lacks any excitement whatsoever. Now, I will say this. And I would be interested to talk to whomever, even though I never will be able to, I'd be interested to talk to whomever was making these particular decisions. Because I was listening to the Making Star Wars YouTube show, and the two hosts on there, Jason Ward and I think Rob's the other guy's name, and Rob was complaining along the same lines of as I was about the chapter last week, chapter 4. And I know I'm not talking about story, and these are things that just affect me personally, so I get that. I'm nitpicking here, but Rob had mentioned that same shot that I did from chapter 4 of the ship landing in the hangar on Inquisitorius, and how it comes straight at the hangar, and then it just kind of drops down and lands. And he made a comment that George Lucas would never do that. He would never frame a shot that way, and it would just be, George Lucas would film it, would have the special effects be different. That being said, I watched A New Hope the other day in between these episodes, and that's not true. There are these special effects shots that are done, and one specifically of the Millennium Falcon arriving on Yavin, and it's framed exactly the same way. It's an original shot. It wasn't redone for the special edition. And it's the practical model of the Millennium Falcon coming straight at the camera as it's going over the moon, over Yavin and the forest below. And I saw somebody else make a comment that they felt this show, in the way they personally appreciated the lower, doing that thing with my fingers, production value of Obi Wan Kenobi, because they felt it matched A New Hope. And I thought that was really interesting. Because of the example that I just gave you, they mentioned the framing of other shots from A New Hope and how it looked lower production and this looked lower production, and wondering if this was an intentional choice to make it look this way. Either way, the commenter was saying they actually liked it because it felt more in line with A New Hope, and that's cool. I've made all kinds of rationalizations for Star Wars before. Typically, as you know, listening to the show, I'm a bit of a Star Wars apologist. That being said, though, I have a hard time believing that it was that it was an intentional choice to make it look this way production-wise, considering how close it was to the prequels. And it does not look nearly as good as the prequels did, which is saying something, because the prequels were shot on all, blue and green screen. And this show, in my opinion, is really being hurt by the volume. That is the stage that has the LCD screens. And specifically, when the troops arrive on the planet with Reva, and the transport's coming down, they look fine. Landing in the hangar, it's fine. But then when the stormtroopers embark from their transports and they stand in formation, I mean, it is clear as day. They're standing on a stage with brown dirt surrounded by video screens. I mean, the lighting just gives it away. And considering what lengths Disney has gone to replace directors, Colin Trevorrow, the individual that was supposed to do the first Boba Fett, I can't remember his, Josh Trank, Lord and Miller, having Tony Gilroy come in to clean up on Rogue One. I'm just sitting back a little dumbfounded as to why, compared to specifically Book of Boba Fett, and Book of Boba Fett had some wonky action shots in some of those scenes, and we talked about that, about the speeder chase in one of the early episodes was just super slow and seemed really weird. But certainly The Mandalorian, I'm just, it has me scratching my head about why this show that was the most anticipated and the most sought after of the fandom, as somebody that follows this, why this, of all the new live-action shows of the three that we've seen, looks the cheapest. I'm really, really confused by this. And I don't know if it comes down to budgetary reasons because of COVID. I don't know if it comes down to training of new people who are in charge. I don't know if it comes down to Disney and Lucasfilm needing to save money because it was happening during that period of time and Disney was losing money and they knew that people were going to tune in regardless. Either way, my opinion is kind of irrelevant because the show is crushing it in terms of streaming numbers from everything that we've heard. And unless Disney and Lucasfilm actually do pay attention to a lot of the commentary, which I don't believe that they do, and I don't think that they necessarily even should, I'd be a hypocrite to go and say so. If the streaming numbers show that the vast majority of individuals have no problem with the production value on the show, then, okay, then good on them. I just know that I have some issues. I have a few issues with the writing. The line of Vader saying, "Launch the attack," and then we have two little transports leaving the Death Star. I'm just kind of, okay. When they finally break through the door on the planet and begin attacking the rebels, for lack of a better word, and Reva does this "into the breach." It sounds like something that should be said, the Battle of Minas Tirith, or less so than 24 stormtroopers going off against 24 armed rebels. It by comparison, it's just like, oh, okay. And it's interesting, too, because that scene leading up to it was kind of a redo. The stormtroopers all in formation, the bringing in of the big gun with the closed shield door. It was kind of it echoed the second to last season 1 episode of Mando and The Last Jedi and the Battle of Crate, but not done nearly as well. I thought the Tala death scene was done good, kind of forecasted, given the quiet moment between her and Obi-Wan in the midst of when all of this was happening. Leia was fine in the show. She was given something to do. Again, any complaints that I have, most of the complaints that I have around the show are just the way that the framing of shots, the production value, and kind of how clunky it feels. The Tala death scene, you get a shaky cam from out of nowhere, and then these up close shots of her and the droid. But to be honest, by the end of the episode, based off of what had happened, I kind of had completely forgotten about her. I was somewhat confused over the not Obi-Wan Kenobi turning himself over. And this is where some of the writing I had problems with. Obi-Wan Kenobi handing the lightsaber and the communicator to the guy that was pretending, Kumail Nanjiani's character. I'm like, well, okay, this isn't going to last. This is happening for a reason, one. And I specifically thought it was because of the communicator for some reason, and I was right. And then certainly he's going to end up getting his lightsaber back. You do have some great moments. The scene of Obi-Wan and Reva through the door and finding out Reva's backstory, which is interesting. I appreciate her backstory. I find that fascinating that she was willing to go and commit such atrocities in becoming an Inquisitor to try to get at Vader. I question a little bit what's taken her so long, unless it was just a matter of getting him completely alone with nobody else around, which obviously didn't work in the story. The flashbacks to Order 66, again, as I mentioned, I thought that was solid. It gave plenty of rationale for why she is the way that she is. I'm wondering what happens next with her, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But then Obi-Wan Kenobi decides to give himself up. Okay, I got you. I understand the rationale there. But then Vader says, "Stand down." They have Obi-Wan in custody, and they march him back behind the shield doors again before Vader arrives. And then Obi-Wan Kenobi knocks out the stormtroopers. That seemed to be a move clearly designed only to make sure that Obi-Wan Kenobi can get away, and not because there was any rational reason to do so. The rational thing would have been to stand down, stop attacking. They've got Obi-Wan Kenobi in their possession, and for Reva just to keep him right there. Then we have one that's, in my opinion, an almost unforgivable edit. Outside of the shield door, and again, I apologize for nitpicking this way. It just has me scratching my head. of why they let this happen. That area outside the shield door was not very big. You had the Inquisitor ship that Reva arrived on, the black ship, and then you had the 2 transports. And if you watch all of the shots leading up to that, they pretty much fill up the space in that hole-in-the-ground cavern. When the troops then embark and they all get in formation in front of the door. When Vader arrives, you get a profile shot of Vader walking, and then you get this looking at Vader as he's walking towards the camera shot, and you can see his white Imperial shuttle in the background. Suddenly, the other ships aren't there anymore. Now, my son's pointed out that you can barely see him in the back, but if you look at the previous shot, there wasn't really any room for Vader's ship to have landed in the first place. And again, it goes back to those other shots that I mentioned before. The stormtroopers behind the closed door in the water that ended up drowning within a matter of 5 seconds. So the guy that gets choked out behind the cubicle on Inquisitorius and is left there for all to see. I just, again, I'm confused more than anything. Now, what I'm looking forward to doing is when this entire series is done and we have next week's finale, which it looks like could be about 90 minutes. I'll be curious to watch this show from beginning to end, basically binge watch it. Because I think that this show would have been better served had they released it all at once and we could watch it all at once. I just don't think the episodes were strong enough to stand on their own based on what was clearly them working, in my opinion, on a limited budget. We didn't go to a lot of locations. It's not very grand in scope, and comparatively speaking, and this could be tainting my view of the show, we've also been watching Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and I'm not the biggest Star Trek fan, but I'll tell you what, you compare a Paramount Plus TV show of Star Trek Strange New Worlds to Obi Wan Kenobi on Disney Plus, and you would think that Obi Wan Kenobi was a fan film compared to the production value of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And that's what I don't understand. And for those that have no issues with anything that I'm saying, like I said last week, I am really, really happy for you. Maybe once I get past all of my personal nonsense, I'll feel differently. But let me get into a few other things. I really liked Vader and Vader versus Reva. I think some of the way that it was directed, I think it could have been better, but that was a really unique fight between those two, especially with Vader choosing to use the Force instead of a lightsaber for almost the entire fight until he splits apart Reva's lightsaber, which can happen, by the way. It was a little confusing. It looked like Vader broke it, but I think that lightsaber intentionally comes apart into 2 pieces. And he ends up using both pieces. They square off together. He takes them back. I really thought that was a dynamic and interesting take on a lightsaber fight. So hat tip to them for that particular scene. I thought that was good. Grand Inquisitor returning, I thought it was great. I would have loved more Grand Inquisitor in this show. I liked him from the beginning. I thought the first 2 episodes of this series were pretty darn good, apart from a few minor complaints. But unfortunately, I just feel like it kind of went downhill from there. And I think that his portrayal of the Grand Inquisitor was great. And I hope that we get a lot of him in the last episode, because that is a character that I would have loved to see more of. And this is all subjective too, right? And I have to say that up front. This is all subjective. I think that the production, in my opinion, is clearly subpar. And I would actually argue with someone that it's not even a matter of subjectivity when you compare it to The Mando and the Book of Boba Fett. The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett look much, much better than Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I would argue that point with somebody. So, Reva. Why wasn't she killed? And why did they let her live? I'll be curious to see if they provide sort of a rational explanation of why Vader and the Grand Inquisitor did not totally take her out. Or did they think that she was just going to die there? Maybe that's what it was. But given how Vader was so quick to go and murder people in episode 3 of this series before he took on Obi Wan Kenobi, I question whether or not that kind of portrayal should not have prompted Reva's death. I had minor issues in episode 3. I didn't bring them up at the time, but I had minor issues in episode 3 of Vader's ruthlessness and his just straight up murdering people on the street. Especially when you look at him from the original trilogy. Typically, Vader had sort of his own rationale for killing people, getting information out of them, betrayal, making mistakes. He wasn't just straight up murdering people. However, we are closer to him killing younglings than we are to the Vader that we see in A New Hope. And I've changed my tune on that because he did straight up murder children. And if that's the case, and there's no escaping that. So there's no reason why he wouldn't straight up murder other people indiscriminately in his wanting to get at Obi-Wan. So I've changed my tune on that one. Now the question is, with Reva knowing that there are some children involved on Tatooine, because the transmission on the hologram communicator, right? And by the way, Bail Organa, why are you giving the location out? I heard this in another podcast, and the host was absolutely right. It's like, it was like saying, I'll be on Tatooine wearing these clothes at 2:00 in the afternoon. Why would you be so specific about something so important if you, in recording, not knowing whether or not that could be stolen? I know that it helps with the story along, because Reva's got to know that there's a child on Tatooine. But the question is, is she going to go to Tatooine now to try to help Obi-Wan Kenobi? How is she going to get to Tatooine? Or will she continue to use the dark side and try to bait Vader to Tatooine in order to still try to take him out? But Vader can't ever know about Luke, right? Now, I'm pausing for a very specific reason. I don't think that they're going to do this. However, I think it's possible. Given how they've messed with the knowledge of Leia and Obi-Wan Kenobi based off of the recording that Luke retrieves in A New Hope, which I still think was a mistake. They should have always just kept Ben. They should have always had Leia only known Obi-Wan Kenobi as Ben in this series. Having Reva say Obi-Wan to her, I think, was a huge mistake, and I laid that out next week. I just want to put this out there in case I'm right. What if we find out that Vader discovers that his son Luke is on Tatooine and decides to leave him there? Now, I know you may hear that and go, that would totally break canon. But would it? I don't want them to do that. Do not misunderstand. But given the way that they handled Leia's knowledge of Obi-Wan Kenobi and her going on this grand adventure, I never expected that Leia was going to make it through the entire series with Obi-Wan Kenobi. And she's now gone through all of this stuff. And yet, that message to Obi-Wan is completely impersonal based off of all of that. Unless they rectify that somehow later and do like a mind wipe at the end. But what if we find out that Vader ends up discovering that his son is on Tatooine, and that's where we see the little bit of good in him, and he chooses just to leave him there? I was going over the knowledge that Vader has in the original trilogy, and we get the sense that Vader, right, the Force is strong with this one in A New Hope. And then when we get to The Empire Strikes Back, Luke is off Tatooine now. And it talks about Vader searching for Skywalker. So they could conceivably make it so Vader finds out that his son is on Tatooine, but we see that teeny tiny bit of a good side in him, and he decides he's going to let his son live and stay there. Now, again, I don't think they'll do that, and I don't want them to do that. I just want to throw it out there in the off chance that I happen to be right. Because based off what they've decided to do in the show so far, I would not put it past them. And the Star Wars community is really, really forgiving. And typically I am a Star Wars apologist. But again, I'm really disappointed. Obi-Wan Kenobi was not a show that I was clamoring for. If you had it on a list of different series that I could choose from, it would not have been I don't even think it probably would have been in the top 5. But based off what we saw in the trailers, I started to get really, really excited. And I'm disappointed now. This was not the story of Obi Wan Kenobi, in my opinion, rediscovering his connection with the Force. If we get Qui-Gon Jinn as a Force ghost in the next episode, great. I thought that this was going to be about Obi Wan Kenobi trying to get Anakin Skywalker to turn back to the good side, and maybe that'll play out somewhat in the final episode. But I expected this more to be about Obi-Wan trying to get to Vader and Anakin to try, knowing that there was good in him, playing off of what Obi-Wan Kenobi said in A New Hope of where Darth Vader in the original trilogy said to Luke, in Return of the Jedi, and nobody brings this up in any of the commentary around the comments that Vader has in the original trilogy with regard to Obi-Wan Kenobi. But in Return of the Jedi, when Luke turns himself in, Vader says, Obi-Wan once thought as you did. So maybe we'll get that paid off in the last episode, but I really thought that's what the show was going to be about. Now, again, that's expectations being thwarted, and that's on my end, personally, right? This is the story they decided to write, and this is the story that happened, and that's how I look at these tales. So these are more historical documents of what took place. So those are my expectations that I had that didn't end up playing out. But that is to say that, oh man, that would have been a story that I think I would have enjoyed more than another lone wolf and cub story, and very little arc going on with Obi-Wan Kenobi. So I'll reserve final judgment on this whole series once we get past this last episode, and I have a chance to look at it as a whole. And again, my own personal situation changes, and I'm on the road to recovery. As always, I want to know what you think, and we'll share some listener feedback here in a moment. TalkShowNerd at gmail.com. Also, leave a comment up on YouTube if you're listening there, and it'll be interesting to see. I'm looking forward to sitting back and watching this again, and just kind of absorbing it now that it's all done, and because it probably is unfair of me to go and compare it to another series, a completely different type of space opera in Star Trek. I was specifically pointing to the production values. And this one just has me really scratching my head. All right, as I said, I went way longer than I expected. Let's get to this. Taika Waititi is apparently, I'm looking at a story here from Bespin Bulletin. Taika Waititi is still writing and storylining his Star Wars movie. Now, Bespin Bulletin says it's unlikely to be released in 2023. We had Kathleen Kennedy make the comment that they were looking at 2023, the end of 2023, December, for another Star Wars movie. Waititi, though, has revealed in an interview to Screen Rant where he was in the process of writing his Star Wars film. Now, I will say this. I know that this is a recent interview, but there's a lot of comments about Star Wars coming out from Taika Waititi. We have D23 coming up in the next month or so, or next few months, I believe, and we're supposed to be getting some Star Wars news coming out of this Disney convention, D23. I still think there's a possibility this movie could come out in late 2023. But let me share with you what Taika Waititi said. He says this to Screen Rant. Let's see here. Recently, Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy indicated we could see the flick hitting the big screen by the end of the year. And revealed in an interview where he is in the process of his Star Wars film, he said the following: "That's yet to be seen. I don't know. I'm still writing. I'm still coming up with the ideas and storylining it, and just wanted to make sure that it feels like a Star Wars film, because I could say, oh yeah, we'll just write any old thing and set it in space and then put Star Wars on the front. But it wouldn't be a Star Wars film without certain elements and a certain treatment. So I've got to just make sure that it stays within that wheelhouse." Now, again, Waititi's comments follow that of Kathleen Kennedy, who revealed during Star Wars Celebration they were looking to release the film in late 2023, but it wasn't locked in. Shortly after, Production Weekly reported that Waititi's film is set to shoot in Los Angeles, but didn't have a start date. As they've mentioned in previous articles, Waititi's upcoming film, it seems unlikely that it would that the film would release in late 2023, mostly due to the hectic schedule of the writer-director. Now, that's, again, I think it's, at this point, I will give it 50-50. It's speculation to know exactly how busy the writer-director is and the aspects that would take the longest period of time, whether or not that would necessitate Taika Waititi's direct involvement. Pre-production, creation of sets, creation of concept art, vehicles, ships, costumes, and all that. That can all be done for him to go and, approve later. I know he says that he's working on it, but to me, those comments are vague enough to where they still allow some nuance of it could be done and it could be getting approval from the story group. Now, he also had this quote, and he said, look, I think for the Star Wars universe to expand, it has to expand. I don't think that I'm any use in the Star Wars universe making a film where like everyone's like, oh, great. Well, that's the blueprints to the Millennium Falcon, and that's Chewbacca's grandmother. That all stands alone. That's great. Though I would like to take something new and create something new, some new characters, and just expand the world. Otherwise, it feels like it's a very small story. All right, so I think that there is a 50-50 shot that Taika Waititi is a lot farther along than he's letting on. They're talking a lot about it now. Lucasfilm is allowing him to talk about it now, which leads me to believe that they're getting close to making an announcement soon. We also know that he's going to be shooting on the volume, for better or worse, and the volume has been used in good ways as of late. It's been used on the other shows well. It was used in the Batman most recently, and I couldn't even tell that it was being shot on the volume. I'm not going to take the production value of Obi Wan Kenobi and rip the volume completely. So I think there's still a possibility that movie could come out the end of next year. I think it's about 50-50. All right, let's get to listener feedback this week. First comes from SheVP, who writes this in response to my criticism of Obi Wan Kenobi last week. John, you have nothing to apologize for. Your opinion is spot on. For me, it was more of missed opportunities. I wish Leia's arc had finished after episode 3. We could be on to other things. Obi-Wan being in the tank would have been a perfect opportunity for flashbacks or flashback to. LOL, that's funny. I got completely taken out of the trench coat scene. It was just ridiculous. I was in a chat during a live stream and typed the chat, OMG, this is such BS, I hate it. I would have never said that before, LOL. If they had to get one show right, it had to be this one, and I just hope the last 2 episodes knock it out of the park. Yeah, I tend to agree, and I think this episode was a step in the right direction. The story was there, again, just the execution was wonky. All right, and a friend of the show, Patrick's got a lot to say, so let me share it with you. First off, Patrick writes, for lack of a better phrase, John, I guess I have to run your face in it a little. The issues you have had with Obi-Wan and other Star Wars shows don't come up and affect me while I watch the show like you do. And they typically don't for me either. And I don't get it. I miss the apologist, John. And I don't know if this is me finally admitting that maybe we're getting too much Star Wars. I like the scarcity. And I'm going to say a comment about that at the end of the show. So having to say that, I really enjoyed the story they're telling so far. With that said, with only a couple of episodes left, as I've seen this after seeing episode 4 and listening to your podcast to that episode, my biggest issue is I'm wondering how they're going to reconcile this much interaction between Leia and Ben. When it was just the first 2 episodes, or even spilled into the third, I was thinking, okay, you can chalk her message in A New Hope to her not remembering exactly the name of a man that saved her, and Bail told her that this is the message to send. But after all of this, how is it she just doesn't say in the message, the girl that you saved 8 years ago? So it's things like this and the continuity we currently have without seeing it play out that I struggle with and hope that they ultimately resolve these types of things. And again, your point about the message in the second part of the podcast is stuff that concerns me as well. But to your point, my hope is that this is why they have a story group and people like Dave Filoni who are involved and should be providing input on this. Now, Chapter 5, Patrick wrote just this week. I have to say I loved this episode. And I got to hand it to you, great call on Reva and the part she played not only in this episode, but up until this point on the show. I have to say I also love some of the parallels in this episode to the end of The Last Jedi. And Vader, again, displaying his abilities and power in a fight even more than in Rogue One was amazing. Yeah, I'll give that to you, and I probably should have mentioned that. Him pulling the ship down, even though there was that wonky perspective shot, and ripping it apart, I thought was cool. But again, as you've brought up, and I'm wondering where this leads to questions about the canon and continuity of A New Hope, not only with the message from Leia, but also the fight. Either we need to see some major stuff go down in Chapter 6, which I think we will, but not sure it will be enough to make a good explanation, or the possible rumor of a second season we would need to explain that clash between Vader and Kenobi. That, or as sacrilegious as it sounds, you have to do one more special edition of A New Hope just to clean up the saber fight, and at least to bring it up to The Empire Strikes Back as standard. Again, my prayers to you on your surgery. Sad we have to wait your opinions on Episode 6, but I look forward to hearing your thoughts on 5 and your thoughts on 6 once you've recovered. Thank you, your friend in the Force, and may it be with you. Thank you so much, Patrick. I really do. Gotta get choked up. I really do appreciate that. Speaking of scarcity, I have been holding off, apart from watching The New Hope the other day. I've actually been holding off on watching the sequel trilogy. I've been really wanting to watch the sequel trilogy recently, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait until I'm recovering, and I've been dying to watch The Rise of Skywalker as of late. So I'm making myself wait, and I'm actually glad that I am, because that absence makes the heart grow fonder kind of deal, right? I'm looking forward to getting home from the hospital and sitting down on intense pain medication and watching. I got a whole bunch of my favorite films all picked out. I'm looking forward to doing that. My dream, by the way, when it comes to EMBARK, my science fiction space opera series, if I ever had the chance to make it into a movie, I would want to do a completely different promotion for the film. I would want a trailer that was like a full trailer, but something that was more just giving the total vibe of the story without giving everything away, and really limited early footage, just down to a trailer and maybe like a few TV spots just taken from the trailer. I would want toys released ahead of time, basically the old A New Hope model. I want the film released in theaters and then held off for as long as possible. If it ended up being a hit, held off as long as possible before it went to streaming or for Blu-ray release. I think that there is something to be said for quality content and making people wait for it, and what that does for nostalgia, what that does for taking away the lack of oversaturation. I know that would never fly in today's promotions, in the way that we promote films these days. But that's what I would want to do with my EMBARK series. If you haven't checked it out, I hope you'll go to Amazon.com or to mynerdworld.net and treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with science fiction. Written for adults, but great for kids ages 11 and older. Pick up EMBARK Book 1 today in ebook. It's only 99 cents in ebook, also available in hardcover, a paperback, and audiobook. And if it's your first time listening and you're unfamiliar with my science fiction space opera 7-book series, which is complete now with the recent release of Battle Planet Book 7, Book 1 goes as follows. Katha's father passed away 1 year ago. Yesterday, he gave her the key to saving humanity. She just doesn't know it yet. When Katha Morrow uncovers a cryptic message left behind by her late aerospace engineer father, with the help of fellow pilot Taft Guardia, she makes a shocking discovery. Her excitement quickly turns to fear when they learn that an industrial accident inside the largest civilian and military spacecraft factory has set off an apocalyptic chain of events. As war erupts during the global evacuation, Katha and Taft realize the significance of what they found, and so does the enemy. While Earth's evacuees stand upon the brink of annihilation, Katha faces her destiny and might be humanity's greatest hope for survival among the stars. Now, don't miss this 2021 Tale Flick Discovery Sci-Fi Award-winning series. If you like your science fiction space opera with a little bit of military science fiction mixed in, filled with romance and action, then EMBARK is for you. Go to Amazon.com and search for EMBARK and Jon, Jon Justice, or mynerdworld.net. Man, I said I was going to do a shorter show, and I'm back at 45 minutes again. It's like every single time. All right. Thank you so much for checking the show out this week. I hope I wasn't too negative on it. I love my Star Wars. I really do. And look, I've already watched, for as much harping on the show that I've done, I've already watched Chapter 5 3 times. So, look, what does that say? I guess I don't hate it that. I don't hate it. I just have some issues with it. But it's still Star Wars, right? It's still Star Wars. All right. Have yourself a great week. I hope wherever you are, you're happy, you're healthy, you're safe. And your prayers are welcome. As for myself and my family, it's going to be... I'm more worried about them than I am me. I'm worried about, my family not having me and being worried about me. So, your prayers are always welcome. And I really, really do appreciate it more than you know. So, I'll be back with another episode as soon as I'm feeling up to it. And again, I hope wherever you are happy, you are healthy, you are safe. And may the Force be with you. Bye.